Hey guys, Jonathan Ayers with Jonathan Ayers Photography here. Today we're going to go through as if I've never used this before, but I want to do a basic edit in the steps to pull your photo into Photoshop, and then what I would do as far as editing the photo. There's lots of different ways to edit a photo. This is just one way of how I would edit a photo. So you go open, and I saved this file in a specific place. It's in my pictures, portraits, portrait and family. And then the picture that I want to work with today is, we'll go with, we'll go with this one. Nope, I don't. Yep, I want this one. All right. So as you can see, it's rather blue, so we would want to warm that up using the white balance. You can use an eyedropper to change the white balance. You would have to have something in the photo that you know was white. I don't have anything that I know was white. That's pretty close, but it's still kind of gray, and that's a little too yellow. So we bring that back down just a little bit, just using the slider there. Exposure looks good. Contrast doesn't look bad. Maybe up a little bit. Highlights looks good. Bring that up some. Shadows. So for shadows, I would actually want to bring this up some, but I don't want to bring it up some on the whole photo. You want there to be shadows, otherwise there's no depth in the photo. The whites, what I do for the whites and the blacks actually is if you hold down Alt on a PC and drag the slider up, you can see how it's starting to be blown out. Those are where there's no data left in the picture. It's completely blown out. There's no detail there. It's just a solid color. So you want to keep that so I keep it just below where there's nothing. And then for the blacks, I do the same thing. So I'm going to bring that up just a little bit to make sure that there's still data there. It's not just a solid black color. Clarity, I'm going to leave alone. I'm going to bring up the vibrance a good chunk. And that already looks significantly better. I think this looks a little too yellow for her skin tone here. I want her to look like the Ice Queen, but I don't look like she's an Oompa Loompa either. And so some basic lens corrections. Up here in the tabs you have some curve adjustment options. The sharpening, I usually use this. And if you use this, you can hold down Alt again. You can see what's being sharpened. Everything that's white is going to be sharpened. So you don't want like her and all of her skin to being sharpened. That would look really weird. So just a minor adjustment there, and we're going to bring that down pretty far. Just to bring that way sharpen some of those softer edges. Then I always do just a little bit of noise reduction. It was ISO 400, and this was actually on my older camera, the Canon T3i, so it's not as great as it could be. It's a crop sensor. It's an older generation camera. They're out with the T6 now. And then, so to the lens corrections tab, remove chromatic aberrations is something I always do. Enable the profile corrections. So this is going to correct any vignetting that's caused by the lens, any barrel distortion that's caused by the lens. You can do this manually. I usually just let the automatic lens profile that it selects, as long as it's the correct lens and make, then you should be good to go there. And I usually do this defringing it's just something that I do just because on every photo, because you might not see where that is. It's always that way. There's no weird fringing around any high contrast areas. There's none of that pink or green or blue. And dehaze is a newer option if you've used Photoshop in the past, and this was not an option. That came out with, I think, either the last update or 2 updates ago. And saturation, no need to change anything here. If you were going to change this, so say there's something, a funky color in the, like there was a purple address sign in the back, you could actually bring down just the purples and make that go away. You can actually see that that changes, the purples changes even in the blues. So there's this tone is in the blues. You can bring down the saturation in that. It actually changes the hue of the scarf here. So you can bring that up. You can make that a lot richer. You can make it more of a black and white scarf. Take the saturation completely out. One thing that we are going to do, not in here because it's not specific enough, you can select a color in Photoshop and get rid of some of this. It was cold outside when we took this picture, and get rid of some of the redness in her cheeks. And good there, good there, good there. Don't see a whole lot of need for further. This I don't use Adobe Camera Raw, and that's where it opens up into first. I don't use this for very specific adjustments. Well, I will actually. One of the few specific adjustments that I would use this for is brightening up around the eyes, because it's a little dark in here in the corners, and then this eye was kind of shadowed and back here, so bring that up some, bring the feather way up. And then we're going to select bring the shadows up. And not a lot. You kind of want it just this side to match this side. You can see it's actually on the hair a little bit, so I'm actually going to erase that. So how to make the brush bigger or smaller is you can use the bracket keys, which is up from the enter or return button. There's the backslash right above that, and then there's the 2 keys to the left of the backslash. So there was a little bit on the hair there, and you can see it got erased when I did that. And there we go. And then so I'm actually going to show you one other thing that I would do. And that is sharpen the eyes. So we're going to bring this brush down and change make sure you reset this back to what the defaults. That way if you're like, oh, I want to sharpen the eyes, but you still have the shadows boosted, and you start painting and you're like, oh, that looks funky, why is it doing that? It's because one of these sliders wasn't adjusted back. And give the eyes a little bit of sharpening there. Alright, so I think we're good here. Going to open the image, and it's going to open it up here in Photoshop. And so some of the more extensive editing that you're going to do is going to be done now. What I like to do is create layers for my editing. To create a new layer, you can hold down Control-Shift-N, and it'll create a layer, and you can name it there. Or you can click this little... Alright, I'm back. Sorry about that. You know that different tone that your pet has when someone's at the door looking in a window or something? That's what was happening. I'm sure you could hear the dog barking in the background, so I had to go check on that real quick. Sure enough, we got a box. So I was telling you that you click this little piece of paper down here with the folded corner to create a new layer. And then you can rename it by just clicking on the name, double-clicking on the name area of the layer. So we'll name this, we're not going to name this. We're going to go here, you're going to click this little circle with, where it's like split in half, one's darker, one's lighter halves. Excuse me. And then you're going to select the hue and saturation. And then what we're going to do here is that there's some yellow in the teeth. I mean, we're not all supermodels, so that's to be expected. And we're going to go to the yellows. And you can actually select the specific color that you want to select. And that's right in there. Then you can add to that selection by clicking around with the eyedropper with the plus sign to make sure that you get all of the colors that you want to adjust. And then we're going to bring the saturation down. But see how it's changing her skin? She looks like she's dead now. So what we need to do is paint on this mask here, which is this area here. And so we need to select our brush. Bring that on down, and we need to actually invert this. Click OK. Now it's all black. So now we need to, if you want to hit X as a shortcut for switching these two colors here, they're on white and black by default, and if you hit X, it swaps the foreground color and the background color. So makes for a little bit quicker editing. So change the brush size down here, bring the hardness down because you want it to be a pretty soft edge. I'm actually going to zoom in, not that far, but zoom in. Go back to the brush. By hitting B, goes back to the brush tool. And then we're going to paint in right around here on the teeth. Using the bracket keys to adjust the brush size. Saves you from right-clicking, changing the brush size. And then, so you want to make sure you've clicked on the layer mask before you start doing that. Then you click back over on the adjustment, go to yellows, and then I bring down the saturation. Not all the way, because that's obviously very unnatural, but you can take out a good chunk and then maybe brighten it some. So a little bit of a combination there. You want to take out some of the yellows but add some brightness to the teeth. It just makes them look a little bit better. That looks better. And they're not totally unrealistic. So why I use a layer mask like this instead of, I've seen some people use the selection tool. They'll go and select the teeth. They'll do something like this. they'll select the teeth, and then they'll probably do a better job than making the selection than that. And then they will use the hue and saturation up here in the adjustments rather than making a layer. So by doing that, though, you're changing the image. You're not making an adjustment layer. So once you go so far, you only have so many undos. Eventually, this will be filled up when you're editing a photo, and say you can only go back to where you made an adjustment with a brush tool or a clone tool, or you change the picture's exposure or whatever. You can only go back so far, and then you can't change the teeth. You decide, that I don't like that, I want to change that. Well, you can't change it. So the benefit of using layers is that I can always turn this layer off. I can always edit this because I used a layer mask, so I can go in and paint in more, erase some. So say it looks a little funny because I colored some of the gums here. So I would go back to my brush. I'm going to do this, change the hardness a little bit. Bring down the brush size, hit X to swap back so it's black. So you're painting, you're going to basically be erasing the white that you painted in. So then just paint over where you don't want the adjustment to be made. So just paint over the gum areas there a little bit. Make sure you didn't take any color out of the lips. Just a quick overview. And now bring it back out. Alright, so that's one way of adjusting that. That is what I recommend. You can do it. There's lots of different ways to accomplish this, but that's what I would recommend for adjusting someone's teeth or something like that. So for the she's got some blemishes here on her skin, so you can do the same thing actually for this. You can create a layer, and then you can actually paint from here. So if you want to use the clone tool, you can select bring this all the way back up to 100% for everything. So you would hold Alt to select your area that you want to use as your sample. So you would click down, and then you could click where you created a new layer and then paint onto the new layer. So you're not painting onto the actual image, so it's not being destructive. I can go and erase, select your eraser tool, that is huge. And now I can erase those because you're on this layer, you're not on the original image layer. Another thing you can do is create a copy of this layer and to make your adjustments on, that way you can fine tune it. But I prefer using layers. Layers are your friend. They're very non-destructive. You can go back and change them later. So you can use the clone tool as one way to remove blemishes or such. The only downfall is this: you have to keep clicking back and forth between the layer. Actually, so if we go with this, I've never actually tried this. So it will. If you select this sample, the current and below, or all layers, but you don't want to sample all the layers, I would recommend doing just the current and below. And then so you can, it's going to sample from the layer that's below the layer that you're painting on. and then you can paint on the layer that's just a blank transparent layer. So that's one option for removing blemishes, hairs across the face. Lots of different reasons you would use a clone tool. Lots of reasons you would use a clone tool. So I'll just remove some of these. When removing blemishes, don't get carried so far away that your person's starting to look fake, and don't do things that are destructive. You want to make sure that you're keeping texture in the skin. Otherwise, I've seen some people use different kinds of blurs to blur the skin. There is a technique that uses a blurring, and it's called frequency separation, and I'll make a video on that at some point. But so you can use the clone tool is one option. You can use the healing tool. You can just use a spot healing brush. I usually use content aware, so it's, but I don't feel like this usually does as good of a job as it should. It does an okay job, but to me it's too harsh. It's too edgy. It's not soft enough around where it made a adjustment. Like, that looks weird. The other option is the healing brush tool. Not sure why it looks like that here. Oh, I know why. Duh, because I'm not on the correct layer here. So again, you have to use Alt and then select your target area or your sample area, and then you paint on where you want to adjust. So you could actually get rid of this whole piece of hair there. And then you can spend all day removing every little imperfection in someone's skin, but at the end of the day, that's not them. And if you are doing that, I would recommend you actually get permission first, or have very specific instructions on how far they want you to go for you. Is this just family portraits that they're like, whatever, that's me? Or is this some sort of business card or online portfolio biography that they actually do want you to remove every little imperfection that they have? And so that's a couple ways. Another way is the patch tool, and this actually works really well. I like this method. So for the patch tool, you would draw an area around what you want to remove, and then draw it to an area that you want to use to put it there. That is super strong for whatever reason. That's better. I like this, but at the same time, I don't. It's good to be familiar with all of these different options, because not all options work everywhere. Like, you can see that doesn't really work there. It's too, this is a lot brighter than right in the corner of her eye. So we'll just remove all those, go back. So if you've done a whole bunch of these and you can't undo everything all the way back to the open anymore, I can't go all the way back. So everything that I've done that wasn't on a separate layer, you can't remove anymore. You can't go back. So you have to either accept it, try and fix it, or start over. So it's best to be as non-destructive as you can during an editing process. Okay, so one more thing that we're going to do is adjust. You can use a dodge tool. Use the bracketing keys to bring down the brush size. I bring this down very, very far. You want this to be a very subtle adjustment. And then what you would do is click on the base layer here, and what you're basically doing is bringing up the exposure and just on the white of the eye to bring that back some. So make the eyes pop a little bit more. You don't want to do it a ton. You don't want this to look crazy. You don't want it to be super blown out white. That just looks super unrealistic. You don't want it to look like that, basically. So we can go backwards. But remember, if you go too far and you can't go backwards far enough, like you can only go back to here. So you can't undo anything prior to that. But then when you undo something like this, as long as you haven't adjusted anything else, you can go back to where you are now. So we're actually going to bring, because this eye is significantly darker than this eye, so we're actually going to use the dodge tool here, bring that back way back down on the actual eye part, just long enough to try and bring it closer to, and I don't actually like the way that turned out, so that's just a little bit. Alright, so we're done with the basic edit that we're going to do here today. What I recommend doing is saving two different files here. So you'd save as, you can save it wherever is convenient. I would make sure to save this as a Photoshop document as the type. That way it saves the layers adjustments. You can go back and re-edit, if you will. If you need to change something later down the road, you can come back and make those adjustments. So you would just hit save, hit OK to maximum I can't say that word apparently, and then save as, and then go down to JPEG and then save it. So it'll save it as both versions in that folder. They'll be right next to each other. You can use the JPEG or to post on Facebook or send to your client or whoever. And that is it for today's video. I hope this helps. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, follow me on Facebook, Instagram. All of the details for that is in the description below. Thanks. I hope this helps.